All right, guys. So today I'm here with Azuraye Wycoff, the executive director of the Yellow Barn Farm here in Longmont, Colorado, just outside of Boulder. And really excited to be here. How's it going today?
Yeah, it's going great. Thank you for having me on here. It's
Yeah,
gonna be fun.
absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy with all kinds of things. We've already talked to several people on the farm. I know you have a lot going on. Thanks for taking time out of your day to chat with
Yeah,
us.
of course.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about where we're located, maybe an origin story of the farm, and kind of what got you involved in this world of regenerative agriculture, selling direct to consumer, and all these things.
Yeah, for sure. So the history of this property, I mean, there are much more ancient histories of it, but kind of where it's become Allen's farm was the original brothers, Jacob and Alonzo Allen, homesteaded it in 1865. It was a big dairy farm, and it kind of spread from Allen's Park, Allen's Farm, and Allen's Lake next door, about 800 acres. And I think probably somewhere back in like the 70s, it turned into an equestrian center. My parents actually ended up buying the property in 2001, and it was called Autumn Hill International Equestrian Center. I got to go ride horses, and we had a bunch of animals here. My mom had a big biodynamic CSA garden, and it was just a really magical childhood to grow up in.
That's awesome, super cool. I'm a father of two girls, so it's really cool to hear you say that. That's one of the big reasons I started my farm was to kind of give them, that environment and a lot of those values, and just kind of grow up in that space. So that's super cool that you're here now. You've come back to the farm in a sense, and you've valued those experiences growing up. Tell me a little bit. I was telling you earlier, I read an article that you had done a little bit about your background. I think it's really unique. I think you went to school for international business.
I went to school for international affairs and Chinese. I had studied abroad in Spain when I was 16 in high school, and just getting to live in a foreign country and like really recognizing that you don't really know anything and you're back to pretty much being a child learning this language was just really fascinating. So I studied that through college, lived in China for a year, really thought that I was going to be doing cross-cultural diplomacy type
Oh,
stuff. I had a vision of being like an international business consultant,
wow.
but
Okay.
I didn't know anything about business, let alone consulting people on that. And kind of through this very strange, circuitous route, I've ended up back here, kind of in the middle of all of this. I ended up in Boston for a job with U.S.-China relations work, and then ended up working with a really good friend at his moving business, which was just a total startup and not what I thought I was going to be doing. I thought I was just going to help out for like a week or two in the busy season, but ended up getting really sucked into like what it meant to grow this business and seeing that it was like this living, breathing organism. Like
Hmm.
the second you stopped feeding it energy, it would just start to die. And my fascination in all of it was actually building all the systems. So every time something broke down, we would spend an immense amount of time figuring out what happened. How do we prevent that by building better systems and training people? And it's really become something that's actually meant to really empower the workforce, that we've built out software now that the crew is the one who is doing the quoting, they're talking to the customer, they're dealing with everything now, and it kind of takes us out of the mix. And that's been a really big inspiration for how we're designing everything at Yellow Barn, is really how do you actually empower people to figure out how to make good decisions, how to take on more responsibility, not just be an employee that's just showing up to get a job done, but really saying, this is what really calls to me. This is what I actually really want to do. And so, kind of what I've always hoped that this place could be is almost just summer camp for all ages, all year. And when you come here, there's a bunch of little businesses that are operating here that are usually either ag focused or ag adjacent. You know, you just met Josh from We Love Trees, and that's a little tree caretaking company. There is a compost tea business that also does steam weeding. There is a van conversion company that also builds out like a lot of our on-site infrastructure. So having all of these skill sets on the farm has been really massive. And it also gives all of our labor force a way to kind of diversify their own income streams and understand what they actually really want to focus on, and that farming is a part of it, but it's kind of incorporated into this buffet of different options that people get to try out.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's super cool. So you dove into a couple of things that I was looking forward to talking to you about.
Mm.
One, I think, your previous experience in growing that business, that startup, if I can call it that, I think uniquely prepared you for what you're doing here. And then the small businesses you mentioned, I think it's super cool that you guys are incorporating that into the farm model. tell me maybe a little bit more, but what advice would maybe you give a farmer who's looking to partner with a small business that can be a mutual, beneficial relationship for both partners involved?
Yeah. Well, I think the big thing when we came into this was if you're farming for production and for profit, you're almost inherently having to extract from the land. I think regenerative agriculture is a beautiful way that we can actually start giving back to the land and it becomes reciprocal. But there's still a lot happening in that field to make it really profitable and getting things out to market. You're still dealing with a lot of the same
Hmm.
challenges. And so what we recognize is I'm not a farmer, but we have a lot of space here. Is there a way that we can actually partner with a lot of people to kind of create a diversified income stream? Can we actually take all the lessons we're learning from regenerative agriculture and these design systems of holistic design and actually interweave that into the economic structure? And all of these businesses coming into the mix were perfectly aligned with what we were doing. I think the compost tea business is a really good example of she had her business in town, and every time that she had excess compost tea, she'd end up pouring it out on the concrete.
Mm.
And so to have a
Yeah.
business like that that's actually operating on ag land means that like we're also really benefiting from all
Yeah.
the excess that she has. And we essentially call it like a co-working membership. These people are operating here, and what they pay in that co-working membership fee is actually really what allows us to kind of keep all of our basic needs met, and that there doesn't need to be such an incentive on production for food and crop and stuff like that, but it allows that the regenerative agriculture piece that's really stewarded by Drylands Agroecology Research. They do all of our land management. So
Hmm.
anything that has to do with the soil, they're first and foremost in charge of that. And for them, the meat that comes out of the cows and stuff, or the crop that we're producing, is almost a byproduct of the research that they're doing for soil remediation. And so that allows us to actually recognize that there's a lot of product coming forward from what they're doing, and now we're able to be kind of a marketplace that has a membership base that people come in, they are part of this community, they come to these events that we host, they get to potentially incubate a business idea that they had, and they can buy directly from the farmer, um, and consume product that like you get to
Yeah.
see the animals.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. And I know you kind of mentioned, because you're not as producing as much food, more of I don't know what label you'd throw on it, but more of a maybe research, example, regenerative farm. But I still think there's so much value in farmers that are producing food. I mean, what you said about the compost tea, just that relationship. A lot of farmers are investing a lot into infrastructure,
Yeah.
land and facilities and barns and this, that, and the other. And there's a lot of small businesses that are trying to get started and they need resources, they need infrastructure. And if a farm can supply some of those things to give them, like you said, a foothold to get started in their market, and there can be a relationship like
Yeah.
that, that can be really great for a farmer who's looking to diversify,
Oh yeah.
from the space they have.
Absolutely. And one thing I'd also mention on that is like now we're creating like a shared knowledge base where a lot of industries that otherwise would have been siloed are now coming together and sharing space, and we're all able to kind of see where are there areas of overlap. How can we kind of stack functions between all of these little businesses or the producers or whatever it is, and make it so that there's higher efficiency. We're getting to like kind of double dip on all the uses of the building space or the vehicles or the labor pool or the
Sure.
knowledge base, and that makes you so much more resilient in the long run when you've got a community that's actually helping you in all of these different ways.
That's huge. And you said labor, and I'm thinking about, young kid, maybe coming out of school or not, school or whatever path they're coming from to the farm. What an awesome opportunity for them that they can kind of dip their toes potentially in some different industries, some different markets, kind of find out what they like, where they want to be. I mean, that's, if I was young getting started, like to have a chance to come to a place like this and, have all this knowledge and education kind of in one place. I mean, that's super cool. That's awesome.
For sure.
And then beneficial to the farmers that, need help every day doing chores and all the things that farms do
I
to
agree.
produce food. Super cool. So tell me a little bit about the model, the membership model, because it's a little unique. I know you guys aren't producing as much food, but you still are producing some food. There's still people that, are on a membership. I would call it like a CSA
Hmm.
program. There's not as popular on the East Coast where we are, mostly in produce, not so much in, protein shares and that sort of thing.
Right.
But tell me a little bit about that model and then what you like about it.
Yeah. So we ended up deciding to go with more of a membership model because it felt really important to be able to offer people kind of an alternative option for food, that you could get things that are not found in local grocery stores, and there just seems to be a really high demand for, you know, pig meat that is butchered on the land. Like there's a relationship to the land, there is a connection and with like the local producers and processors and supporting that local food economy. So we decided to go with the membership model where people buy an annual membership. It's essentially like, you could call it a herd share or a CSA share. It's almost like a farm share.
Okay.
Like you're investing in the farm and you kind of get to benefit from all the things that are produced on the farm, whether that's food or education, events, what have you. And it's really become kind of this community food sovereignty movement in a way of like people really wanting to stand up and say, hey, I'd really like the choice to be able to choose what I consume, whether that's unwashed eggs or washed eggs.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of trying to give the framework so that that can be an option, and really trying to create the educational platform that people can learn about, why do we wash eggs? If we're washing an egg, we're taking off the bloom, and what does that actually mean? It means
Sure.
you have to keep it refrigerated. And
Yeah.
most people don't know stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot that can come from a membership model that's kind of almost just, it's creating like a private container. Like this is now like a home. We're inviting you into our home and we're teaching you everything of like, this is our family recipe essentially.
Yeah,
This is like the
yeah.
information that's passed down through oral tradition, and it's, it's how do you connect with the land? How do you connect with the community? How do you essentially build like a modern day village?
Yep. Yep. No, I love that. Even my own farm personally, we sell typically individual cuts, whole and half animals and that sort of thing. And I mean, this model just seems from the outsider looking in to build so much more connection, so much more investment from the people that are buying from you and want to source this.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think as a farmer, as a producer, I want those customers that are invested enough to say, I want to take a foothold in this, and this is what I want to be eating on a regular basis, not just kind of on a one-off meal, here or there.
It's a big distinction.
Yeah.
I think initially we were thinking, okay, well, maybe we just leave the gate open all the time and it's open to the public, and we just recognize we don't even want to start with that. That's not really what we're looking for, because what this is like we want to feed this community. And that means that we're going to have a specific number of slots, because that informs us how many cows do we need, how many pigs do we need, how many acres are we actually producing food for. If we know those things and we have a dedicated community that's saying, yes, I want this, it makes it a lot easier to know how to plan for each season.
Sure. No, that's great. Yeah, we could talk, those models all day, but I've got some other things I want to dive into, so I want to kind of take a turn here, and I apologize for that. But we talked a little bit about the small businesses that you're helping support, helping them get a foothold and get started. Talked a little bit about events, and I know you bring outside small businesses in to do some education as well. So between events and that education, tell me a little bit about that. Tell me maybe the biggest thing that you see as a benefit to the entire farm ecosystem about bringing and having those kind of events like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the events are a way that the public really gets to see what's happening on the land. Like that's where, we've hosted the Hanuman Festival, which is a big yoga festival that's happened for the last 2 years. That's kind of like the Apex Summit that happens every season. Then we have the Threshold Project. They have their fall summit, and that's kind of the transition from fall into winter, and it talks about death and dying and composting and kind of this transition into hibernation. And then they do one in the spring. It's kind of the opposite, about birth and life and everything. Then we have a lot of little yoga classes, or we have a bow making workshop coming up, and we've got
I saw the schedules packed.
Yeah.
It's like I looked at it, it's like event, which is awesome. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's been huge. I mean, it gives it kind of diversification in ways that people can engage, and many different price points. And I think with the membership, it allows us to also give the members like discounts to certain things and just create more cohesion. So new people come in, people who are part of the community get to kind of have this reoccurring community hub.
Got it. So they're not all just member-only events. They're kind of a mix, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Super cool. What would you tell a farmer who's maybe would like to host more events on their farm, or doesn't know, hasn't got started, doesn't know kind of where to start? What advice, first steps, just kind of thinking that through, planning that out?
Yeah.
What would you suggest?
Well, I mean, it really depends on where you're at. I can speak for, at least in Boulder County, there's something called the Verified Established Farm Use. You fill out a form and it kind of gives you an automatic okay for hosting a certain number of events that are like 150 people or less all throughout the season. That was huge for us. So I think within each county, you're probably going to face different kinds of restrictions on what you can and cannot do. And mostly what I found is that they're just looking to make sure that you don't host like giant festivals and it gets out of control and your neighbors are
Sure.
bothered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Luckily, like all of our neighbors are really in support of everything we're
Awesome.
doing and they come. But I think a big piece of that is you got to have someone who really loves to coordinate things.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a job for a farmer to do.
Okay.
This is like what I spend a lot of my time doing is coordinating. If we're hosting an event on the 29th called the Farm Hop and Farm Fest, and that's a tour of our partners at Drylands Agroecology Research, their pilot program, Elk Run, and then Yellow Barn. And then we have a little vendors market in this area. And I'm coordinating with vendors and musicians and getting the marketing out. And that alone is like a job. So I think, with the way that we've structured things, having the labor who lives on the land also have kind of a diverse range of interests and skill sets that, they want to help host and run and manage events.
Sure.
That's something I'm looking for. We're currently in the midst of hiring someone for
Okay.
living here and also helping with things like
So
that.
if you're looking for that,
Yep.
there's an opportunity
There
out
is an
here.
opportunity.
It's a great place to be.
Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, I haven't seen anything to kind of rival this in just opportunity, and it's just a great place. I mean, you could ride your bike from Boulder
Yep.
and be over here.
Yeah,
So
it's close.
yeah.
It's a straight shot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I had something that kind of was coming to mind, and tell me a little bit, when you're growing food and doing what you guys are doing in Boulder. I know it's a little different here. I think people are a lot more health conscious, aware of the regenerative movement, aware of some of the practices you guys are doing, more so than maybe the East Coast. Like where I'm located, there's definitely those people out there. Probably a smaller community, but I think you guys. Something I talk to a lot of my clients about is branding.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of touched on it a little bit, and you started to hit the nail on the head, is finding those people that want to come work for you that do have a passion to host events. And so when you're talking about connecting with those people, I think you guys do such a good job of branding. And I tell my clients that branding is not just the logo. It's not just, the website design, which your logo and website design are great, by the way, but it's really your story and what you are connecting with people out and what you guys are putting out there, and those, memories people have when they come to events, and those connections. They start to associate those things with your farm. I think you guys do such a good job of, I won't say being on brand, because everyone kind of has their own brand. Everyone has their own interest, right? You kind of were mentioning about a farmer who wants to get started in events, whatever they're interested in. That's kind of your brand, and that's kind of the lane you're going to live in. And that might be different than your farm, and might be different for a farm down the road. But as long as you're kind of centering, I talk a lot about email content, social media content, web design. But as long as all of that content and the communication is communicating, again, those connections and those memories, and you guys do such a good job of that, not only through, like I said, the traditional idea of branding, but the events you're hosting and the things you're doing, the connections you're making with the community. Is that something that is a super conscious effort? How's the branding marketing side? Is that something that just comes naturally, or tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It all kind of started, when I first moved back here from Boston. I put the whole website together initially and started doing all the Instagramming, and I started a newsletter, and I wrote that every single week without fail for 2 years straight.
Wow.
I was just like,
awesome.
This is the only thing that matters.
That's
like,
awesome.
if I can be consistent with this, and that people just know it's like their weekly newspaper.
Yeah.
We call it the Aquarian Agrarian, and it really talks about what's happening at the farm or the events that are happening, or just shares the inside story of like, this is what we're trying to do. And I think a lot of that, like the deep ethos in it, is like, how do we keep people informed? And how do we make it really feel like this is a community effort? Like, how do we demonstrate, like, this isn't just me. I'm not doing this by myself. There are so many other parties that are actually bringing this entire thing to life. This property is 100 acres. There's no way that my family alone or one farmer could tend to all of that acreage without some support. And so that brand message has really just been like, how do we just share this story? It's a magical journey that we're on. This is all a big experiment. We don't really know what we're doing. And do you want to follow along?
That's awesome. That's so cool that you were able to convey that message, in the course of the emails. It's not easy as a marketer. It's not easy sometimes to convey a message. Things get muddy. Sometimes I think we overcomplicate it a little bit, and just kind of telling exactly what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and what our purpose is, and what we're hoping to provide for the customers that, are buying our farm products or whatever that looks like. So you guys have done a great job of that. It's super
Thank you.
cool. I love the social content.
Oh,
Is
good.
awesome. I
Awesome.
followed along for a little while. I think it was I actually got into triathlons. I know this is kind of off subject. My mom lives in Boulder, and I got into triathlons a little bit. Have ridden by several times on a
Yeah.
bike, and I've
Mhm.
been like, man, that place is awesome looking. Would love to come.
Yeah.
So get super excited to come and
Awesome.
connect with you guys. But tell me a little bit with the newsletter and communicating that about what you just told me about this kind of experiment and what that looks like. How much what advice would you give somebody who maybe doesn't have a business background, marketing background? Maybe they're like that third, fourth generation farmer who never needed to learn these skills because they just weren't a part of their operation. Now they're wanting to sell direct to consumer. They're wanting to get some independence in their operation, and sitting down and trying to tell that story.
Mm.
What advice would you give on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a big one is consistency. Like if you're gonna do it, commit to it. And another one is like know that you're talking to people. And I think people right now don't want to be sold something. They really want an authentic story. They really want to know what's actually happening on the
Hmm.
ground. And it's a world that they're not really privy to. And I think just deep honesty and transparency, I think that builds, and it's about trust.
Yep.
I think that honesty and transparency builds a lot of trust. And then consumers are, really it's people. I don't really think of them as consumers. It's like
Yeah.
we so dehumanize and so like push ourselves apart from each other, but it's really about coming together. And how do you share your unique story of how you got to where you are and why you're doing what you're doing? And, I think that really shines through as people who are tending the land. They're called to this work not because it's easy or glamorous, but because they really, really care.
Yeah.
Or it's something that's been passed down and, they've held on to these traditions. So I think there's a lot that can be shared that people really want to hear about.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think what you just said about there's that deep connection between the person who wants to take care of that land already, and learning how to put that into words can be tough sometimes, but learning how to do it authentically,
Yeah.
just like you're having a conversation with someone here. I think a lot of my clients, like what I tell them is to, because they sometimes sit down to write an email and they struggle through writing, which I do too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just you get in that spot, but think about that one client or customer, think about that one member that you just love,
Yeah.
right? Because when they come, they're hanging on to every word you say. They're so excited to hear about the farm, and you have typically no problem talking to them, sharing your passions with them, sharing with them, what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. And so that's kind of the advice I give is think about you're talking to that person. And typically that conversation will be authentic because it's a natural conversation. It's not an email. And then take that framework and turn that into an email, and
Yeah.
then turn that into your newsletter, and then turn
Yeah.
that into, what you're putting out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think simplicity as well. Like,
Yeah.
don't make it super long, don't make it very complicated. We have 3 topics, and that's it every week. And I never increase that because, most of us don't have the attention span to read a huge long
Yeah.
email. But, you want the highlights and
Yeah.
make it easy for people to see the top. You can kind of see the table of contents, and you know what you're going to read. You can skip down to what you want to focus on. And
Awesome.
yeah, just make it simple.
I'm definitely going to subscribe to the newsletter. I have
Yeah,
not done
it's a
that,
good
so I'll
one.
definitely do that. If you guys are listening, would encourage you to. Tell me a little bit then, how can they subscribe to it?
Yeah.
Tell me the web address and.
Yeah, our website is yellowbarn.farm, not .com. And if you scroll kind of like midway towards the bottom or even down at the footer, there's a little email subscription link.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, I'll definitely looking forward to doing that. I kind of covered a little bit of what I had in mind. Is there anything that, advice you want to share, anything you'd like to share about the farm, or maybe something that I didn't know about that you guys have going on that's super cool?
Let's see. There's so many things to talk about. I think a big thing we're focusing on right now is this idea of local food sovereignty. Like, I think after the pandemic, we just kind of saw how everything broke down and how fragile our global supply chains are. And I think there's been a really big shift since that time towards regenerative agriculture, towards local food systems. What does it mean to compost? How do we build things at home? And so I think just kind of like opening and encouraging the dialogue of like, what are we eating on the day to day? What is our relationship to the food that we consume? And really like looking at food as medicine. I think we've gotten really far away from that and
Yep.
really just thinking it's just something that tastes good or
Yeah.
like we have to feed ourselves to survive, but more of like rebuilding that relationship because everything you consume, it originally was either eating grass that came from soil or was grown in soil. And so really actually asking yourself, what kind of soil was this grown in? do I feel good about where that food is coming from, or could I maybe make the effort to find a local farm to support and get to know them, whether that's subscribing to a newsletter or
Yeah.
actually going out for an event that they have, or signing up for a CSA or a meat share. But I think that there's a lot of power in that, of like, you're voting with your dollars, and it's essentially, it's what you water. You're watering with your dollars. You are choosing where you're putting energy. And I think there's a big shift that we're kind of seeing happen right now. People are really asking, what do I want to put in my body? What do I want to put in my family's body? And how do we make it easier for the farms to find those people and the people to find those farms?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so cool. Personally, I've personally shifted there a bunch. Before I started farming, wasn't as educated. Kind of through COVID, really wanted to do a lot of research on like what do I need as a family of four to feed our family.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where it started for me. Was like just food, right? Just being able to just have that basic need of food, and then dove down the road, got into the soil, right? It starts with the soil. I mean, that's the big thing. And so, if you want to raise that, most nutrient dense food you got to have healthy soil. So then kind of reverse engineering that got me down the regenerative path. And then, kind of, where I am personally on the farm, and, it's kind of led me into this. But I think that idea, and I think that movement is, at least to me, kind of being newer to it in the last few years of like kind of, getting it myself personally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm biased, but I feel that momentum. I feel a lot of people that, I don't want to say they don't trust the system, but they don't trust the system. They maybe don't trust the food that's at the grocery store because they don't know, because we have all this greenwashing and we have all these things and people are confused, and they just want to be able to get the good stuff and know that it's got nothing else in it, didn't come from somewhere else, it was stewarded well, that connection with the land you talked about. So I definitely feel that movement, and it's super cool to let's be a part of it and be in a place like this and talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's what's really exciting, is like there's momentum now. And I think, I won't go into all the politics behind it, but I think if people have heard of Kiss the Ground, there's a new film that they just produced called Common Ground, really saying like the soil is humanity's common ground.
Yep.
And if you can find where that is being shown right now, there's at select theaters around the country, or it'll eventually be probably on Netflix, I would so recommend watching that. That I feel is like what really sheds a light on what our food systems are like.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. There's so much, and you mentioned the politics of it, and I'm not going to dive into it either. But unfortunately, there's so much out there. There's so much misinformation about agriculture in and of itself, the soil, the degradation of the soil, and all these different things going on. And so it's really cool to talk to farmers that understand the role of the soil and the things that are going on. And kind of get how this ties into, all the things we're talking about when we talk about, global warming and all these different, topics that we can dive into. It really plays a huge role in it.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see people committing to agriculture and not just walking away from it.
Yeah.
Because, someone says cows are going to ruin the earth, it's the cow's fault, right? I think that's kind of like the big thing that in past years was pushed, and you've heard, and people caught on to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really cool to see people take initiative in that.
Yeah.
And then the public start to kind of understand that.
Yeah.
And get that. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the public is really getting their information directly from the farmer,
Yep.
that's a big difference versus what you're seeing on TV.
That's right. Well, I'll kind of wrap us up here if you're good.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much for your time today. It's great to kind of chat about all the different things. I wish we could have dove a little deeper into some of your events and some of that. But I know you got a busy day, busy schedule, a lot going on the farm. So just thank you for your time. I hope that, the listeners, were able to kind of walk away with some things. I think it's really cool to think outside the box on how hosting events or having the small businesses be a part of, an operation or a facility can really benefit farming operations of all different sizes, types, that sort of thing. But tell me a little bit before we go, social media links, share them with me. Go ahead and share anything you guys got going on, events, go for it.
Cool. Thank you. Our Instagram is at yellowbarn.farm, same as our website. I'd say the biggest event that's coming up, like if you live in the Colorado region, We have our Farm Hop and Farm Fest, which is the tour and vendor market on October 29th. And that's a really awesome way to really get the deep dive on everything we're doing. It's an hour tour of each farm, and it's all about regenerative agriculture and the circular economies and
Cool.
everything we're
Yeah.
doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And when is it again?
October 29th.
October 29th.
And
Yeah.
the Farm Hop is from 10 to 12, and the Farm Fest is from 12 to 3.
I would love to come be a part. Unfortunately cannot come to that, but that sounds so cool. Like
Yeah.
that sounds like a really cool event. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
we do them every season, so one in the spring, summer, and fall.
Got it. Maybe I'll plan for the spring to come
Yeah.
out and check that out.
That'd
It'd
be
be
great.
awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much for your time today. And have a great weekend. And again, thank you for joining the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Awesome.